Thomas Hartwell built his empire the way his father taught him, brick by brick, deal by deal, with no room for weakness. At 42, he controlled 3 manufacturing plants, 2 real estate portfolios, and enough political connections to move mountains. But the one mountain he couldn't move was the man dying in room 847 of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. His father, Richard Hartwell, the architect of everything Thomas had become. Thomas stood in his corner office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, phone pressed to his ear, watching the sunset bleed across glass towers. His assistant's voice was measured, professional. "Mr. Hartwell," the hospital called again, "your father's condition has deteriorated. They're suggesting you come tonight." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I'll be there in an hour." He ended the call and stared at his reflection in the window. Dark suit, platinum watch, the uniform of success. But underneath, a hollow ache he'd been carrying for 6 months, ever since his father collapsed at the company's annual gala. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months to live, they'd said. It had been exactly 6 months. Thomas grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection again. His father's eyes stared back at him sharp, calculating, unforgiving. The same eyes that had watched Thomas's mother walk away when he was 7. The same eyes that had pushed him through Harvard, through his first failed startup, through every obstacle life threw at them. "You don't cry," his father had said when his mother left. "You build." So Thomas built. A fortune, a reputation, a life where emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. Until Victoria. She appeared in his mind as the elevator descended, auburn hair, green eyes that seemed to see straight through his armor. Victoria Cross, event planner, 28 years old, beautiful in that effortless way that made men stupid. They'd met 18 months ago at a charity gala she'd organized. She'd made him laugh, something Thomas rarely did. Within 3 months, she'd moved into his penthouse. Within 6, he'd proposed. His father had been cautious. "She's young, Thomas. Make sure she wants you, not your money." But Thomas had been certain. Victoria was different. She stayed up with him during late-night calls with Beijing. She learned the names of his employees. She even visited his father in the hospital, reading to him when Thomas couldn't get away from meetings. The engagement ring had cost $200,000. The wedding was scheduled for spring at his father's estate in Montecito. Everything was perfect. Until tonight, Thomas's Mercedes cut through evening traffic towards Cedars-Sinai. His phone buzzed Victoria. "Victoria, just leaving the hospital. Your dad was sleeping peacefully. I stayed until the nurse said visiting hours were ending. Love you. See you at home." Thomas smiled slightly. Even now, with his father dying, Victoria showed up. That was what he loved about her. Her consistency, her care. He texted back, "Thank you for being there. I'm heading there now. Love you too." The hospital's valet took his keys. Thomas walked through the sterile lobby, past families clustered in waiting rooms, past the gift shop selling teddy bears and balloons, absurd tokens for people facing mortality. 8th floor, oncology. The elevator doors opened to hushed voices and the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaning solutions. Thomas walked the familiar path to room 847, nodding at nurses who recognized him by now. But as he approached his father's room, he heard something that made him stop. Laughter. Not his father's labored breathing, not the beep of monitors. Laughter, feminine, light, Victoria's laugh. Thomas frowned. She'd said she was leaving. Why was she still here? He reached for the door handle and froze. Through the small window in the door, he saw Victoria standing beside his father's bed. But she wasn't alone. A man stood with her, tall, dark-haired, expensive suit. Thomas didn't recognize him, and Victoria was smiling. Not the gentle, caregiving smile she wore when Thomas was around. This was different, intimate, conspiratorial. Thomas's hand fell from the door handle. Something cold slithered down his spine. He watched as Victoria leaned over his father, who appeared to be unconscious, and adjusted something near the IV line. The man beside her said something Thomas couldn't hear, and Victoria nodded. Then she picked up a small vial from the bedside table. Clear liquid. She held it up to the light, examined it, then slipped it into her purse. Thomas's breath caught. The man touched Victoria's arm. She turned to him, and he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss. The kind that spoke of history, of intimacy, of things Thomas thought he alone shared with her. When they broke apart, Victoria glanced toward the door. Thomas stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, heart pounding. He heard the door open, Footsteps. Victoria's voice, low and satisfied. Let's go. He won't wake up for hours. You're sure about the dosage? The man's voice was smooth, educated, positive. By morning it'll look natural. Just another complication. Thomas pressed himself against the wall as they passed, heading toward the elevator. Victoria's perfume, the one he'd bought her for Christmas, lingered in the air. His mind reeled. By morning, it'll look natural. They were killing his father. Thomas waited until their footsteps faded. Then he burst into room 847. His father lay in the hospital bed, oxygen tube under his nose, machines beeping steadily. But something was wrong. His breathing was too shallow, his skin too pale. Thomas grabbed the nurse call button and slammed it repeatedly. Help! I need help in here. A nurse rushed in. Denise, the night shift supervisor he'd gotten to know over months of visits. Mr. Hartwell, what's wrong? Something's wrong with him. His breathing, check his IV. Check everything. Denise moved quickly, examining the monitors. Her face shifted from calm to concerned. His oxygen saturation is dropping. Dr. Mehta, code blue, room 847. Suddenly the room filled with people, doctors, nurses, equipment. Thomas was pushed back against the wall as they worked over his father. Start manual ventilation. BP's dropping. Get me epi. Now. Thomas watched, helpless, as they fought to save the man who'd built empires and raised him alone. The man who never showed weakness. The man who was dying because Thomas's fiancée. The thought crystallized into fury. She tried to kill him. After 20 minutes of controlled chaos, Dr. Mehta turned to Thomas, exhaustion etched in his face. We've stabilized him. But Thomas, his system is being overwhelmed by something. We're running a full toxicology screen. How long will that take? 8 to 12 hours for preliminary results. Thomas's fists clenched. I need to know what's in his system. Now. Dr. Mehta studied him. Do you suspect something? Thomas met his eyes. I know something. Thomas left the hospital at midnight. He didn't go home. Instead, he drove to his company's headquarters, a glass tower he'd built with his father's guidance and his own ruthless determination. Security nodded him through. The building was empty except for the cleaning crew. He rode the elevator to the 20th floor and walked into his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desk, leather chairs. The trappings of success that suddenly felt meaningless. Thomas sat at his computer and opened a file he'd never thought he'd need. Victoria Cross. Background check. 18 months ago, when they first met, he'd had his head of security run a standard check. Clean record, no red flags, event planner with a growing business. But Thomas had built his fortune on due diligence. He knew how to dig deeper. He started with her business. Cross Events. Registered 3 years ago. Client list included several of LA's elite families, the Hendersons, the Chens, the Beaumonts. Thomas pulled tax records. Revenue looked solid. Everything seemed legitimate. Then he cross-referenced her client list with obituaries. His blood went cold. Henderson patriarch. Died 8 months after Victoria planned their anniversary gala. Heart attack. Chen matriarch. Died 6 months after Victoria organized her birthday celebration. Stroke. Beaumont heir. Died 4 months after Victoria coordinated his engagement party. Sudden illness. 3 clients. 3 deaths. All elderly. All wealthy. Could be coincidence. Thomas didn't believe in coincidences. He pulled hospital records. Bribing the right people had always been a skill of his. The Henderson patriarch had been admitted to Cedars-Sinai with mysterious symptoms 3 days before death. The Chen matriarch, same hospital, similar presentation. The Beaumont heir died at home, but preliminary blood work showed unexplained toxicity. Thomas's hands trembled as he typed. Every single one had been poisoned, and Victoria had been close to all of them. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Victoria. Where are you? I'm worried. The hospital said you were there earlier but left. Are you okay? Thomas stared at the message. This woman, the woman he'd given a ring to, a home to, access to everything he owned, was asking if he was okay. After trying to murder his father, he didn't respond. Instead, he called the one person who'd warned him from the beginning, Elena Rodriguez, his head of security, former LAPD detective, the woman who'd told him to dig deeper into Victoria's background before proposing. She answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the late hour. Thomas, what's wrong? I need you at the office. Now. And Elena, bring everything you have on Victoria Cross. Everything. Elena arrived 40 minutes later, carrying a thick manila folder and a laptop. She was in her 50s, grey-streaked hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from Thomas and opened the folder without preamble. "You finally ready to hear this? Tell me everything." Elena pulled out a photograph. A younger Victoria, maybe 23, standing beside an older man, wealthy, by the look of his suit and the yacht behind them. Victoria Cross isn't her real name. She was born Victoria Castellano. Father was a con artist who died in prison when she was 16. Mother was an addict who overdosed when Victoria was 20. Thomas felt sick. She spent her early 20s working as an escort for high-end corporate events. That's where she learned how to blend into wealth, how to identify targets. Targets? Elena pulled out more photos. Different men, all older, all clearly wealthy. In the last 10 years, Victoria has been linked to 6 different wealthy men. All of them died under suspicious circumstances. All after updating their wills to include her. Thomas couldn't breathe. The most recent was Martin Shu, tech investor, 72 years old. He died 3 years ago, 6 months after proposing to Victoria. Left her $2 million. Why wasn't she investigated? She was. But there was never enough evidence. The deaths looked natural: heart attacks, strokes, sudden illness. Wealthy old men die. It happens. Until it happens 6 times. Elena nodded. She's smart. She spaces them out. Changes cities. Changes names. But the pattern is there if you know where to look. Thomas stared at the evidence spread across his desk. A serial killer hiding behind charity galas and wedding plans, and he'd almost married her. "There's one more thing," Elena said quietly. She pulled out a final photograph. The man from the hospital, the one who'd kissed Victoria. His name is Marcus Delacroix. He's her partner, probably her lover. He poses as various professionals: lawyer, financial advisor, business consultant. His job is to help her gain access to the targets and make sure the deaths look natural. He's a murderer. They both are. Thomas stood and walked to the window. The city sprawled below him, millions of lights, millions of lives. He'd spent 42 years building a fortress of wealth and control, and a 28-year-old con artist had walked right through his defenses. "What do you want to do?" Elena asked. Thomas turned back to her. His father's eyes looked out from his own face, sharp, calculating, unforgiving. "I want evidence. Real evidence. Enough to put them both away for life." "That's going to be difficult. They're professionals. Then we'll have to be better." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Thomas didn't go home that night. He stayed in his office, Elena beside him, planning their next move with the precision of a military operation. "We need her confession," Elena said, spreading surveillance equipment across the conference table. "Everything else is circumstantial. Good lawyers could argue coincidence. Then we get her to confess." "How?" Thomas looked at the photo of Victoria and Marcus. "We make her think she's won." By dawn, they had a plan. Elena would install hidden cameras in Thomas's penthouse, disguised as smoke detectors, picture frames, even the thermostat. Every room would be monitored except the bathrooms, audio and video, all feeding to a secure server Elena controlled. "What about your father?" Elena asked as they packed up the equipment. Thomas's jaw tightened. "The toxicology results should be back this morning. Once we know what poison she used, we'll have the first piece of real evidence." His phone buzzed. "Dr. Mehta." "Thomas, I have the preliminary toxicology results. Can you come to the hospital? I'm on my way." Dr. Mehta met Thomas in a private consultation room. The doctor's face was grave. "Your father has high levels of succinylcholine in his system. It's a paralytic used in anesthesia, but in the wrong dosage, it can cause respiratory failure." Thomas's blood ran cold. How did it get into his system? "That's what concerns me. Succinylcholine breaks down quickly in the body. The only way we detected it was because we ran the screen within hours of administration. Someone gave this to him recently, probably through his IV line." "Can you prove it was intentional?" Dr. Mehta hesitated. "Medically, I can document the presence of the drug, but legally, proving how it got there is another matter. Hospital staff is being interviewed." "But it wasn't hospital staff." Thomas's voice was steel. "It was my fiancée." The doctor's eyes widened. "Thomas, that's a serious accusation." "I know, and I'm going to prove it." Thomas left the hospital and called Elena. She used succinylcholine. It's a paralytic. Smart choice, Elena said grimly. Breaks down fast, hard to detect. She's done this before. How long until the cameras are installed? 2 hours. But Thomas, you need to act normal. If she suspects anything, she'll disappear. I know. Thomas drove home, his mind racing. Every memory of Victoria now felt contaminated. Her laugh, her touch, the way she'd said I love you while planning his father's murder. The penthouse was quiet when he arrived. Morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. Victoria sat at the breakfast bar in his shirt, coffee in hand, looking like every man's dream. "Thomas!" She rushed to him, concern etched on her face. "I was so worried. Where were you?" He let her embrace him, fighting the revulsion crawling up his spine. "I was at the office. Needed to think. How's your father?" "Stable. They're running tests." Victoria's eyes flickered just for a moment. Relief? Frustration? "That's good," she said carefully. "Do they know what caused the episode?" "Not yet." She studied his face. "You look exhausted. Why don't you rest? I'll take care of everything today." "Actually," Thomas said slowly, "I need to tell you something." Victoria tensed almost imperceptibly. "What is it?" "The doctors said my father might not make it through the week. I need to prepare for the funeral, the estate, everything." He watched her process this, watched the mask of concern slip back into place. "Oh, Thomas, I'm so sorry." She touched his face. "Whatever you need, I'm here. I know you are." He pulled her close, hating himself for the performance. "What would I do without you?" Over her shoulder, he saw Elena's van pull into the underground parking garage. The cameras would be installed within the hour. "Why don't you go to the spa today?" Thomas suggested. "You've been under so much stress taking care of my father. You deserve a break." Victoria hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Positive. I'll handle everything here." She kissed him softly. "You're too good to me." "I'm not good at all," Thomas thought. "I'm hunting you." The moment Victoria left, Elena's team swept through the penthouse like ghosts. Cameras in the living room, the kitchen, the master bedroom, audio pickups in every corner. Within 90 minutes, the penthouse was completely wired. "We're live," Elena said, showing Thomas the feed on her laptop. Multiple screens showed every angle of his home. "If she makes one wrong move, we'll have it." "What about outside the penthouse?" "I've got a team watching the hospital and tracking her phone. If she meets with Marcus again, we'll know." Thomas nodded. "Now we wait." But he didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, while Thomas sat in his home office pretending to work, Victoria returned from the spa. She looked relaxed, refreshed. She made tea in the kitchen, humming softly. Then her phone rang. Thomas watched on the hidden camera feed as Victoria's expression changed. She glanced toward his office, then walked onto the balcony, closing the glass door behind her. Elena had anticipated this. A directional microphone hidden in the balcony furniture picked up every word. "Marcus, I told you not to call me here." Victoria's voice was sharp, nothing like the soft tones she used with Thomas. A pause as Marcus responded. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's grieving, distracted." Another pause. "The old man should have died last night. I gave him enough succinylcholine to stop an elephant." Thomas's hands clenched into fists. "The doctors must have caught it in time," Victoria continued. "But it doesn't matter. He's weak. One more dose, and it's over." Elena looked at Thomas. "We've got her." But Thomas held up a hand. "Wait. Let her finish." "I'll go back tonight," Victoria said. "Visiting hours end at 8. I'll wait until the nurses change shifts, then finish it. By morning, Richard Hartwell will be dead, and Thomas will inherit everything." She laughed cold, calculating. Nothing like the warm sound Thomas had fallen in love with. "Of course, I'm sure. We've done this 6 times, Marcus. This is no different." Wealthy old man, grieving son, concerned fiancée, who's been so supportive through the tragedy. 2 months after the funeral, I'll suggest we move the wedding up. Thomas will be grateful. Within a year, he'll have an accident boating, maybe, or a car crash, and then it's all ours. Thomas felt bile rise in his throat. 50 million, Marcus. Maybe more once we liquidate the real estate. We'll be set for life." She ended the call and stood on the balcony for a moment, staring out at the city. Then she smoothed her hair, fixed her smile, and walked back inside. "Thomas," she called sweetly, "would you like some tea?" He emerged from his office, forcing his face into a grateful smile. "That would be nice." As she poured tea in the kitchen, chatting about wedding plans and sympathy flowers. Thomas watched her with new eyes. She was a monster, and he was going to destroy her. That evening, Thomas called Detective Sarah Chen, Elena's former partner at LAPD, and someone he trusted implicitly. "Thomas Hartwell," she said when she answered. "Elena said you might call. She sent me the audio file. Can we arrest her? We can bring her in for questioning. But a good lawyer will argue the recording was obtained without her consent. We need more. We need to catch her in the act." Thomas's jaw tightened. "She's going back to the hospital tonight. She's going to try to kill my father again. Then we'll be waiting." Detective Chen assembled a team. Plain clothes officers would be stationed throughout the 8th floor. Hospital security would be briefed. And in room 847, Thomas would be waiting with his father and with enough witnesses to make Victoria's arrest ironclad. At 7:30, Thomas arrived at the hospital. His father was awake for the first time in days. Oxygen tube still in place, but eyes clear. "Thomas." His voice was weak but sharp. "You look terrible." Despite everything, Thomas almost smiled. Even dying, his father was impossible. "Dad, I need to tell you something." Over the next 20 minutes, Thomas explained everything. Victoria's real identity, the previous murders, the plan to kill his father, and eventually Thomas himself. Richard Hartwell listened without interrupting. When Thomas finished, the old man's eyes were hard as diamonds. "I knew." Thomas froze. "What?" "I knew she was wrong. Too perfect. Too convenient." Richard coughed, wincing. "I hired a private investigator 3 months ago. He found the same things Elena did. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" Richard's gaze was steady. "You were in love. I needed proof, not suspicions. I was going to tell you after the investigator finished his report. Then she escalated. Then she tried to kill me." Richard's hand gripped Thomas's arm with surprising strength. "But she failed, and now we finish this." At 7:55, Detective Chen whispered in Thomas's ear. "She just entered the building." Thomas positioned himself in the chair beside his father's bed. In the hallway, nurses moved about their normal routines, except each one was actually a plain clothes officer. In the supply closet, cameras recorded everything. At 8:15, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She wore a soft blue dress, hair pulled back, face the picture of compassionate concern. She carried a small designer purse inside. Thomas knew was a vial of succinylcholine. "Thomas, you're still here?" She sounded surprised. "I thought you'd be resting. Couldn't sleep. Wanted to stay with Dad." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes calculated. "That's sweet. Why don't you go get some coffee? I'll sit with him." "Actually, I just had some." "You should go. You've been here every day." Frustration flickered across her face. "Thomas, you need rest." "I'm fine." They stared at each other. Thomas saw the moment Victoria made her decision. "Actually," she said softly, "I need to use the restroom. I'll be right back." She left the room. Thomas watched on his phone the hidden camera feed showing Victoria walking down the hall, then ducking into the stairwell. Detective Chen's voice came through his earpiece. "She's meeting someone. Stairwell, level 7. Thomas couldn't see it, but he heard Elena's report. "It's Marcus. They're arguing. She's saying you won't leave. He's telling her to abort." Thomas stood. "I'm going down there." "Thomas, wait." But he was already moving. He took the stairs 2 at a time, rage propelling him forward. He burst through the stairwell door on the 7th floor. Victoria and Marcus stood 3 steps below, frozen. "Thomas." Victoria's face went white. "You're supposed to be upstairs," Marcus said, recovering faster. He smiled smoothly. "I'm Marcus Delacroix, Victoria's business partner. We were just discussing." "I know exactly who you are." Thomas's voice was ice. "And I know what you're planning." Victoria's mask shattered. For the first time, he saw the real woman underneath, cold, calculating, furious at being caught. "You don't know anything. I know you're Victoria Castellano. I know about Martin Shu, the Hendersons, the Chens. I know about the 6 people you've murdered." Marcus moved toward Thomas, but suddenly the stairwell filled with police. "LAPD, hands where we can see them." Victoria lunged for her purse, but Detective Chen was faster. She grabbed Victoria's wrist, twisted, and pulled out the small vial. "Succinylcholine," Chen said, holding it up. "Same poison that nearly killed Richard Hartwell last night." "That's not mine," Victoria hissed. "He planted it." "We have you on recording," Thomas said quietly. "Every word you said to Marcus this afternoon. Every plan you made to kill my father, and eventually me. Every detail about your previous victims. Victoria's face contorted with rage. You have nothing. Those recordings are inadmissible. I never consented. You're right, Detective Chen said, handcuffing her. But you just walked into a hospital with a controlled substance. You'll be held on that while we build the murder case. Marcus tried to run. He made it 4 steps before 2 officers tackled him. As they dragged Victoria away, she screamed at Thomas. You were so easy, so desperate to be loved. You would have given me everything. Thomas watched her go, feeling nothing but cold relief. Are you okay? Detective Chen asked. No, Thomas said honestly. But I will be. 3 months later. The trial was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. Victoria's fingerprints on the vial, the recorded confession, testimony from hospital staff who'd seen her near Richard's foreline, financial records showing 6 previous inheritances from dead wealthy men. Marcus Delacroix turned state's evidence, confessing to his role in exchange for a lighter sentence. He detailed how they'd met in prison. She was visiting her father. He was serving time for fraud. They'd partnered after their release, perfecting their system. Seduce wealthy older men, get close to their families, poison them slowly, carefully, inherit, disappear, repeat. Thomas testified about the night he saw Victoria in his father's hospital room, about the kiss, about the vial of poison. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Victoria Castellano was sentenced to life without parole for 6 counts of first-degree murder. Marcus Delacroix received 25 years. Richard Hartwell survived. Weak, diminished, but alive. On a warm afternoon in May, Thomas sat with his father on the terrace of the Montecito estate. The ocean stretched before them, endless and blue. You saved my life, Richard said quietly. You saved mine first. Hiring that investigator, warning me. I should have pushed harder. Thomas shook his head. I wouldn't have listened. I had to see it myself. They sat in comfortable silence, watching waves break against the shore. I'm selling the penthouse, Thomas said. Too many bad memories. Good. What will you do? Work less, live more. Thomas smiled slightly. Maybe take your advice for once. Richard laughed, a weak, rusty sound, but genuine. Don't get carried away. A nurse appeared in the doorway, Anita, the woman who'd cared for Richard through his recovery. She was 63, had raised 4 children alone, and possessed the kind of steady competence that couldn't be faked. Time for your medication, Mr. Hartwell, she said kindly but firmly. Richard grumbled but obeyed. As Anita administered his pills, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency, Thomas watched the interaction. This was what real care looked like. No performance, no agenda, just one human helping another survive. Anita, Thomas said impulsively. How would you like a job? She looked up, surprised. I have a job, Mr. Hartwell. I mean permanently, as my father's full-time nurse. Double your current salary, health insurance, retirement plan. Richard raised an eyebrow. Don't I get a say in this? No, Thomas and Anita said simultaneously. Richard's laugh turned into a cough, but his eyes sparkled. Fine, but I'm a terrible patient. I've raised 4 boys, Anita said dryly. I think I can handle one stubborn old man. As she left to prepare dinner, Richard turned to Thomas. You're learning. What? How to recognize real people, real loyalty. Richard's hand found Thomas's shoulder. Victoria almost destroyed you, but you caught her. You saved us both. Thomas felt something break open in his chest, not pain, but release. For 42 years, he'd built walls, kept people out, trusted only his father and his own instincts, and those instincts had nearly killed them both. I loved her, Thomas said quietly. Or I thought I did. You loved who she pretended to be. We all did. Richard squeezed his shoulder. But now you know the difference. 6 months later, Thomas stood in the small garden behind Anita's daughter's house, watching children play. Anita had invited him to her grandson's birthday party, insisted, actually, in that no-nonsense way of hers. You need to be around normal people, she'd said, not just lawyers and business partners. Normal people with normal lives. So here he was, drinking lemonade and watching a 7-year-old unwrap presents. You look lost. A woman's voice, amused. Thomas turned. She was maybe 35, jeans and a simple blouse, dark hair pulled back, smile lines around warm brown eyes. Anita's daughter, Maria. I don't do children's parties very often. Thomas admitted. I can tell. You're standing like you're at a board meeting. He laughed despite himself. Sorry. Hazard of the profession. What profession is that? Making money and forgetting how to be human. Maria studied him with that same directness her mother possessed. Anita said, You saved your father's life. She saved both of us, really. That's not how she tells it. They stood together, watching the children shriek with joy over birthday cake. My mum says you've been through something terrible, Maria said quietly. She didn't give details, just said you needed friends. Your mother is wise. She usually is. Maria smiled. So do you. Do I what? Need friends? Thomas looked at this woman, this normal, kind woman with paint stains on her jeans and laughter in her eyes, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Yes, he said. I think I do. 1 year later, Thomas sat in his new home, smaller than the penthouse, warmer, filled with books and comfortable furniture instead of designer statements. His father lived in the guest house, stubbornly independent but close enough for Anita to monitor. On Thomas's desk sat a framed photo, not of wealth or success, but of a birthday party. Him and Maria's son, both covered in frosting, laughing. They'd been dating for 6 months. Slowly, carefully, building something real. She knew everything about Victoria, about the trial, about how close Thomas had come to marrying a murderer. And she'd stayed anyway. Not because of his money. Maria was a teacher, lived simply, needed nothing he could buy. But because, as she'd said one night while they cooked dinner together, I don't love who you were, I love who you're becoming. Thomas's phone buzzed. Elena. Victoria's appeal was denied. Life sentence stands. He set the phone down, feeling nothing but distant relief. Victoria Castellano had tried to build her life on lies, manipulation, and murder. She'd almost succeeded, but in the end, the truth was stronger. Thomas heard his father's voice outside, arguing good-naturedly with Anita about his physical therapy. He heard Maria's car pull into the driveway, her voice calling hello. This was what wealth really meant. Not money or power, but people who stayed, people who told the truth, people who loved you for who you were, not what you could give them. Thomas had spent 42 years building an empire, but it took nearly losing everything to learn how to build a life. He walked outside into the golden California evening, where his father waved from the garden, where Anita scolded affectionately, where Maria smiled and held out her hand. And for the first time in his life, Thomas Hartwell felt truly, completely rich. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.